Good morning. Today's session is on joints and we'll be learning about the classification of joints. So what are joints? Joints occur where two or more bones meet. So here where two or more bones meet, you get a joint and these junctions are supported by soft tissue. What are the functions of the joints? It facilitates the growth of the limbs, especially the limbs. Then it transmits the force between the bones and it enables movements of the various parts of the body and it also transmits the weight. Joint in Latin means articulation and arthron is joined in Greek. And what is the study of joints called? That is called arthrology. So now let us move to the main topic, that is the classification of joints. So joints can be classified as synarthrosis and diarthrosis. Synarthrosis are joints where movement is not possible and diarthrosis are movable joints. So synarthrosis are further classified as fibrous joints and cartilaginous joints and diarthrosis are the synovial joints. So synarthrosis are generally immovable joints and synovial joints are the movable joints. So we'll learn today's topic under the following headings. We learn about the fibrous joints, we learn about the cartilaginous joints, synovial joints, and we look at some clinical correlations. The fibrous joints, cartilaginous joints, and synovial joints can be asked as short note. So we'll go to the fibrous joints. So here the bones are united by fibrous tissue. Intervening between the bones, you get fibrous tissue, and no movement is possible in case of fibrous joints. So there are three kinds of fibrous joints. These are the sutures, syndesmosis, and gomphosis. Sutures, syndesmosis, and gomphosis. We have to study each in detail with the examples. So first we'll go to sutures. Sutures are, we have already studied, the joints of the skull, and intervening between the two bones we get the thin sutural membrane. So examples for most of the sutures we have covered, and we'll see each type of suture. So there are 5 types of sutures. The first type of suture is the serrate suture. This is the serrate suture. The two bone ends have serrated margins and there is a thin sutural membrane intervening between the two bones. So example for serrate suture is the sagittal suture of the skull. This suture is known as the sagittal suture of the skull between the two parietal bones. This suture is the sagittal suture. So that is the example for serrate suture. Then we have denticulate suture. Denticulate suture, here the two bone margins are tooth-like. That is why they are called denticulate suture. Here you can see the base is narrow and the tip is wider like a tooth. That is why it is called denticulate suture. An example for denticulate suture is the lambdoid suture. The lambdoid suture that is seen between the two parietal and the occipital bone. This is the lambdoid suture and that is an example for denticulate suture. Now moving to the third type of suture, that is squamous suture. Here the two bone ends are flat and overlapping each other. So that is why it is called squamous suture and it is seen between the parietal bone and the squamous part of temporal bone. So this is squamous part of temporal bone. This is the parietal bone. Between these two you get the squamous suture. Then we have the plane suture. Here the two bone ends are plane and they are just simply opposed to each other, separated by a sutural membrane or the sutural ligament between them. Example for plane suture is between the two palatine processes of the maxilla, both the maxilla, you get the plane suture where they are simply opposed to each other. That is example for plane suture. The fifth type of suture is the wedge and groove type of suture. So here one bone end will be like a wedge, the other bone end will be like a groove to which this wedge will fit snugly. And this type of suture is otherwise called shin dialysis. This term is very important, shin dialysis. This is the diagram of the nasal septum. Here you can see this is the sphenoid bone and you can see here from the sphenoid bone you have the rostrum of sphenoid bone and this is the vomer bone. And the upper margin of vomer is split to form the ala of vomer. Ala means wings. So wings of vomer or the ala of vomer and it is acts like a groove and the rostrum acts like a wedge. So this is the example for wedge and groove type of suture or the shin dialysis. So there are 5 types of sutures. The first one is the serrate suture with serrated margins of bone. Example is the sagittal suture. Then we have the denticulate suture where the bone margins are like tooth and example is lambdoid suture. Then we have the squamous suture where the temporal and the parietal bone are overlapping each other. Then we have the plain suture where the palatine process of two maxilla are opposed to each other, separated by sutural ligament. And then we have the last type, that is wedge and groove type of suture, or otherwise called shin dialysis, that is seen between the rostrum of sphenoid and the ala of bone. In all these sutures, between the two bone ends, there is a thin layer of fibrous tissue which is known as sutural ligament with sutural membrane. When the fibrous joints are asked as a short note, we have to draw these diagrams with examples. Now moving to the next variety of the fibrous joints, that is syndesmosis. Here the bony surfaces are connected by a cord or by a sheet of dense fibrous connective tissue. So these connective tissue fibers will be longer than that of the sutural membrane, okay, in that we see in sutures. So as a result, since they are slightly longer, slight movement is possible in case of syndesmosis. We need to see examples for syndesmosis. These are the inferior tibiofibular joint. Then we have the middle radioulnar joint, or otherwise called the interosseous membrane. Then we have the interosseous sacroiliac joint. And we have the ligamentum flava and the ligamentum nuchae. These two terms you must have heard, ligamentum flava and the ligamentum nuchae. So we'll see the examples. These are the bones of the forearm. You can see the radius and you can see the ulna, and intervening between them, this membrane is the interosseous membrane. You can see the connective tissue fibers are longer, so slight movement is possible. And this is otherwise called the middle radioulnar joint, because here you will get the superior radioulnar joint and here you will get the inferior radioulnar joint. So this interosseous membrane forms the middle radioulnar joint, and it is example for syndesmosis. Another example is seen in the bones of the leg. This is the ankle joint actually. This is the tibia, this is the fibula, and here you can see the interosseous tibiofibular joint. That is an example for syndesmosis. Then this is the sacroiliac joint. This is the sacrum. Here you get the sacrum, and here you get the hip bones, and this is the ilium of the hip bone. So this is the sacroiliac joint. So this interosseous sacroiliac joint is also an example for syndesmosis. You have studied, you have learned the parts of vertebra. This is the view from the posterior aspect. You can see this is the lamina, and connecting the lamina, so adjacent lamina, you get this yellow colored structure, that is the ligamentum flava. Okay, and you have studied about the ligamentum nuchae, that is extending from the external occipital protuberance towards the C7 spinous process. There is one continuous sheet of fibrous tissue that is made of elastic fibers, and that is known as ligamentum nuchae. Now we'll go to the third type of fibrous joint, that is the gomphosis, that is peg and socket type of joint, gomphosis. So here the peg-like processes will articulate with a socket of another bone. The best example for that is the roots of teeth that has articulated with the alveoli of the mandible and the maxilla. So roots of the teeth with the mandible and the maxilla is the example for gomphosis, or the peg and socket joint. And here is movement possible? Yes, slight movement is possible while chewing. And what is the ligament that is intervening between the roots of the teeth and the alveoli? Here you can see this pale blue color. Inside this dark blue color, there is a pale blue color ligament, and that is known as the periodontal membrane or the periodontal ligament. Okay, so it is made of collagen fibers, and that is intervening between the roots and the alveoli, and slight movement is possible while chewing. Now coming to cartilaginous joints. In case of fibrous joints, the bones are united by fibrous tissue, whereas in case of cartilaginous joints, the bones are going to be united by a piece of cartilage. It can either be hyaline cartilage or it can be fibrocartilage. And compared to fibrous joints, cartilaginous joints, restricted movements are possible. Whereas in fibrous joints, mostly the movements are limited. And there are two types of cartilaginous joints. There is synchondrosis and symphysis. So synchondrosis is primary cartilaginous joint and symphysis is secondary cartilaginous joint. How are these two different? We'll just see, and we'll look at the examples too. So we have synchondrosis or primary cartilaginous joint. Here the bones are united by a plate of hyaline cartilage. So intervening between the bones you have a plate of hyaline cartilage, and it is temporary in nature. So it is not permanent. It will be completely replaced by bone. And this term is known as synostosis. So once it is completely replaced by bone, it is known as synostosis. In case of primary cartilaginous joint, no movement is possible, and it is designed for bone growth. So that is the primary cartilaginous joint. Let's just look at some examples. So the junction between an epiphysis and the diaphysis of the growing long bone. So we know the end of the long bone is known as epiphysis and the shaft is known as diaphysis, and between the epiphysis and diaphysis there is a plate of hyaline cartilage which is called the epiphyseal plate or the growth plate, and that will be replaced by bone once the growth of the long bone is completed. Then between the basi occiput and the basi sphenoid, there is a piece of hyaline cartilage. Yellow colored bone is the sphenoid bone, and this blue colored bone is the part of occipital bone. So between these two, there is a plate of hyaline cartilage, and it will be replaced by bone at the age of 25 years. And also one more example is there, that is the first chondrosternal joint. We'll look at that. This is the first chondrosternal joint, that is between the first costal cartilage and the sternum. This joint, okay, that is known as primary cartilaginous joint. When we look at the other costal cartilages, from second to seventh costal cartilages, they are synovial joints. Okay, they will have a joint cavity within them. These are the synovial joints, whereas the first costal cartilage, the joint between the first costal cartilage and the sternum, that is the first chondrosternal joint. That is an example for primary cartilaginous joint, and it does not permit movement, and it will be replaced by bone later. This is the first chondrosternal joint. And another example that we saw is the epiphyseal plate, which is a plate of hyaline cartilage. This is the epiphysis, this is the diaphysis. At the junction between epiphysis and diaphysis of the growing long bone, we have the epiphyseal cartilage of the growth plate, which is a plate of hyaline cartilage. And once the growth of the long bone is completed, this will disappear and it will be converted into bone. Now coming to symphysis. Symphysis is the secondary cartilaginous joint. How is this different from the primary cartilaginous? In primary cartilaginous joint, there is a plate of hyaline cartilage between the two bone ends. Here, the two bone ends are lined by hyaline cartilage, and intervening between the two hyaline cartilage, we get a plate of fibrocartilage. Okay, so that is the secondary cartilage. The articular surfaces are covered by hyaline cartilage, and they are united by a plate of fibrocartilage intervening between them. And this is permanent. This is not going to be replaced by bone. This is going to remain like this throughout their life, and it is usually seen in the median plane of the body. Okay, and slight movement is possible. The plate of fibrocartilage that is seen between the two bone ends helps in slight movement. Examples for symphysis is, think of the joints that is seen in the midline. So we have the intervertebral joints. The intervertebral discs are seen between the vertebral bodies. So that is the intervertebral joints. Then we have between the two hip bones in the midline anteriorly, get the symphysis pubis. Then you have the manubriosternal joint, and you have the symphysis mendi. Symphysis mendi you have already studied. So let us look at the examples. This is the intervertebral disc that is seen between the two vertebral bodies, adjacent vertebral bodies. So that is the intervertebral joints. Then you have the manubriosternal joint. So this is the manubrium of the sternum, and this is the body of sternum. So between the manubrium and the body, you get the manubriosternal joint. This joint is an example for secondary cartilaginous joint or a symphysis. Here movement is possible at the time of respiration. The body of sternum is moving up and down, whereas the manubrium remains stable. Okay, and another example is the pubic symphysis that is seen between the two hip bones anteriorly. This pubic symphysis allows slight movement, especially at the time of labor in females. For delivery of the child, the pubic symphysis becomes lax and it allows movements of the hip bone for the baby to come out through the birth canal. Then this is symphysis mendi that is seen between the two halves of the mandible. Though it is a secondary cartilaginous joint, the symphysis mendi is going to disappear at the age of 2. Now coming to synovial joints. So synovial joints are coming under diarthrosis. That is, they are movable joints because they possess a joint cavity. Compared to other joints, bones were separated by a piece of cartilage or by fibrous tissue, whereas in case of synovial joints, they possess a joint cavity which is held together by soft tissue. So here we have the joint cavity is enveloped by a fibrous capsule. This yellowish structure that we see, that is the fibrous capsule, which is attached to the ends of the two bones and holding the two bones together. And the inner part of the joint cavity is lined by the synovial membrane. Then the ends of the bones, you can see the ends of the bones, the articular surfaces of the bones, they are lined by a thin layer of hyaline cartilage, and that is known as the articular cartilage. And the synovial membrane, this reddish color structure is the synovial membrane. The synovial membrane will not extend over the articular cartilage. So, synovial membrane is absent over the articular cartilage. And in some joints, the joint cavity may be completely or partially divided into two by an articular disc or a meniscus. Okay, the articular disc is a piece of fibrocartilage that is seen between the two bones. Okay, and that will divide the joint cavity into two, either completely or partially. So this is how a synovial joint looks. You can see the two bone ends, and you can see the articular surface is lined by a thin layer of hyaline cartilage, which is the articular cartilage. Uniting the two bones together, we have the fibrous capsule. So the joint cavity is enveloped by the fibrous capsule, and on the inside, we can see the synovial membrane that is lining. Okay, and the synovial membrane is absent over the articular cartilage. Now let us look at the components of the synovial joint. So we learned the outermost covering of the joint is the fibrous capsule. It is formed by bundles of collagen fibers, okay, and it stabilizes the joint by binding both the bones together. And the fibrous capsule is pierced by blood vessels and nerves to supply the joint. So we can see this is the lateral view of the elbow joint, and this is the fibrous capsule of the elbow joint. We can see some nerves that is piercing the fibrous capsule, and these nerves are also supplying the muscles that is acting on the elbow joint. The nerves that are ramifying on the fibrous capsule, when these nerves are stimulated, it causes the muscles to contract by reflexes, and that protects the joint. So the numerous sensory nerve endings that is ramifying on the capsule, and when they are stimulated, it produces contraction of the muscles by reflexes, and that will protect the joint. So this mechanism is known as the watchdog action of the capsule. It is called the watchdog action. These nerves are like acting like watchdogs, okay, to protect the joint. So underneath the fibrous capsule, on the inner aspect, it is lined by a thin vascular membrane that is known as the synovial membrane. Okay, so the innermost lining of the fibrous capsule is the synovial membrane, and it is a highly vascular cellular connective tissue membrane. And what is the function of synovial membrane? It is going to produce the synovial fluid. The synovial fluid is going to fill the cavity within this joint capsule. And why do we need the synovial fluid? It is going to act as a lubricant to facilitate the movements of the joint. So this synovial membrane in particular is going to liberate hyaluronic acid. So this hyaluronic acid in the synovial fluid maintains the viscosity of the synovial fluid. Function of the synovial membrane is to liberate the hyaluronic acid. One more function is there for synovial membrane, that is, it helps in removing the particulate matter and the worn out cartilage cells. So from this articular cartilage, that may be worn out cartilage cells that is released into the synovial fluid and other particulate matters. All these structures are removed by phagocytic activity by the synovial membrane. So synovial membrane has got two main functions. One thing, it is going to produce the synovial fluid, and the hyaluronic acid in the synovial fluid is going to maintain the viscosity so that it can act as a lubricant to facilitate the movements of the joint. Another important function is it is going to remove the particulate matter and worn out cartilage cells by phagocytic activity. So these are the two important functions of synovial membrane. Now coming to the next component of the synovial joint, the articular surfaces of the bone is lined by articular cartilage. This articular cartilage is actually hyaline cartilage. What is the function of this articular cartilage? It provides a friction-free movement and resists compression. Okay, so friction-free movement between the two bones, and it resists the compression. How is this articular cartilage, this hyaline cartilage, different from regular hyaline cartilage that is seen in the rest of the body? This articular cartilage, it is avascular and it is non-nervous. Okay, and it lacks a perichondrium. So this hyaline cartilage, it lacks a perichondrium. So it is avascular and it is non-nervous. And once this articular cartilage, if it is damaged, it cannot be replaced. It is going to be replaced only by fibrous tissue. So that is about the articular cartilage that is seen at the articular surfaces of the bones. Now coming to the articular disc or the menisci. So in some joints, the joint cavity is divided into two, completely or partially, by a plate of fibrocartilage intervening between the two bone ends. Okay, so it's a plate of fibrocartilage between the two bone ends. And what is the function of this articular disc for those joints? It has a cushioning effect, or it acts as a shock absorber. This term is very important. It acts as a shock absorber, and it prevents the wear and tear of the articular cartilage. So here, between the two bone ends, if you get a meniscus or an articular disc, it will prevent the wear and tear of the articular cartilage. And another important function is it helps in the lubrication of the joint. So this is a diagram of the knee joint. You can see the lower end of femur is articulating with the upper end of tibia. And you can see this blue colored structure is the articular cartilage, which is made of hyaline cartilage. So the articular surface is covered by this blue colored hyaline cartilage or the articular cartilage. And between these two articular cartilages, you can see the intervening pink colored, the pale pink colored structure, that is the lateral meniscus and the medial meniscus. Okay, these menisci are made of a plate of fibrocartilage and they act as shock absorbers. They prevent the wear and tear of the articular cartilages. Okay, and they provide a space within the joint cavity so that the flushing of the synovial fluid is possible, and thus it helps in the lubrication of the joint. Now coming to the next component within the synovial joints, that is the synovial fluid that is filling up the joint cavity. So it is a viscous fluid and the viscosity depends upon the concentration of hyaluronic acid. We know that hyaluronic acid is liberated by the synovial membrane, and more the amount of acid, more is the viscosity. Okay, and the synovial fluid is secreted by the synovial cells that is within the synovial membrane and the mast cells. So it is secreted by synovial cells and mast cells. What is the function of the synovial fluid? We already saw. Since the articular cartilage is avascular, it does not have a perichondrium and it is avascular. So how does it get its nutrition? The nutrition is by diffusion from the synovial fluid. Okay, so the articular cartilage is getting its nutrition by diffusion from the synovial fluid, and the synovial fluid helps in the lubrication of the joint cavity to prevent the wear and tear. Now, it is interesting to note that the viscosity increases in cold temperature. So, if you go to cold countries, you can experience stiffness of the joint. Okay, that is because the viscosity is increased. There is more amount of hyaluronic acid that is secreted in the joint cavity, and there will be stiffness of the joint. Now, how will you avoid this? You have to do more movements. So, when you wake up and there is stiffness of the joint, you have to do more movements with the joints, like flexion and extension of the fingers, that encourages more lubrication. Now, what is bursa? Bursa are pouch-like sacs of connective tissue that is seen around the joint. So they are actually the synovial membrane that comes out through certain openings within the capsule, and that will facilitate the movements of the tendons of the neighboring muscles. So this is the shoulder joint. Okay, this is the scapula, this is the humerus, this is the head of humerus. Okay, the head of humerus is going to articulate with the scapula, the glenoid cavity of scapula, to form the shoulder joint, and you can see the fibrous capsule around the shoulder joint. Okay, and these are cut ends of the tendons of muscles that is acting on the shoulder joint. So you can see there is an opening within the fibrous capsule. Okay, and through this fibrous capsule, the synovial membrane is going to come out and become a pouch-like sac. Okay, that is known as bursa. And these bursa help in the movements of the tendons over the fibrous capsule. Okay, so that there is no friction between the tendons and the fibrous capsule. You can see bursa. This is another bursa around the shoulder joint. This is a large bursa, but this bursa is not communicating with the joint cavity, whereas this bursa is communicating with the joint cavity. Now, between the synovial membrane and the fibrous capsule, there may be a pad of fat that is present, and that is known as the Haversian pad of fat. This is the knee joint lateral view. Okay, and this is the fibrous capsule seen around the knee joint, and the synovial membrane is lining on the inner aspect. Between the synovial membrane and the fibrous capsule, you can get the Haversian pad of fat. So this is infrapatellar, that is below the patella, infrapatellar pad of fat. The classification of synovial joint. So when a short note on synovial joint is asked, you have to write about the various components of the synovial joint. Then you have to write about the classification of synovial joint with examples. So we learn the classification according to the shape of the articular surfaces, then according to the number of the articulating bones, and also according to the axis of the movement and the movements that are possible. So first we look according to the shape of the articular surfaces. They can be classified into many types. These are the plane type of synovial joint, the hinge variety of synovial joint, the pivot type, ellipsoid type of synovial joint. Then we have the saddle type of synovial joint, the ball and socket type of synovial joint, the condyloid type of synovial joint, and the bicondylar type. So all of these synovial joints, what is the shape of the articular surfaces, we will look at and to learn the examples for these synovial joints. So now coming to each type of joint, we have the plane joint. Here the articular surfaces are smooth and it will permit only slight sliding movement or gliding movement. So examples for these are the intercarpal joints and the intermetatarsal joints. So these are the carpal bones of the hand. So this is the forearm bones and this is the carpal bones and this will be metacarpal bones. So these are the carpal bones, the bones of the wrist. There are 8 carpal bones. So between these carpal bones, intercarpal joints, they are plane joints. Another example is the intermetatarsal joint. Here this is the skeleton of the foot. You can see the bones of the leg. You can see the tarsal bones. These are the tarsal bones, and these are the metatarsal bones. So intermetatarsal joints. These are the intermetatarsal joints. They are also plane type of synovial joint because the articular surfaces are smooth and flat. Coming to the next variety of synovial joint, that is a hinge joint. Here there is only one axis, so it is a uniaxial joint. The axis being a transverse axis. So movement is permitted only in one direction around the transverse axis. So that is flexion and extension movement is happening around the transverse axis. And the examples for hinge joint are the elbow joint and the interphalangeal joint. Now let us look at these examples. So this is the elbow joint. Okay, this is the lower end of humerus and the upper end of radius and ulna. Here you get the elbow joint, and like a hinge around the transverse axis, you get flexion and extension. So this is the flexion and this is extension. This is an example for hinge joint. Another example is our interphalangeal joints. So these are the carpal bones we were talking about. These are the metacarpal bones, and these are the bones of the fingers. Okay, bones of the digits. So these are the phalanges. Between the phalanges, we'll get the interphalangeal joint. So these are the interphalangeal joints. So this is the proximal interphalangeal joint. This is the distal interphalangeal joint. Here also along the transverse axis, only flexion and extension of the fingers are possible. So this is also an example for a hinge joint, the interphalangeal joint. So what are the two examples for the hinge joint? We have the elbow joint and the interphalangeal joint. Now coming to the next variety, that is the pivot joint. Here this is also a uniaxial joint. So only one axis is there, and that is the vertical axis. So for hinge joint it is transverse axis, and for pivot joint it is a vertical axis. Pivot is like a rod and it fits into the osseofibrous ring. So sometimes the pivot will be fixed and the ring rotates, or sometimes the ring is fixed and the pivot rotates. Two types of examples. So we look at the examples. This is the superior radio-ulnar joint. So these are the bones of the forearm. This is the ulna and this is the radius. The radius is rotating. Okay. So you can see this is the superior radio-ulnar joint. You can see the head of the radius is rotating, whereas the osseofibrous ring, this blue color structure is the osseofibrous ring. So that is fixed and the head of the radius is rotating. This axis is the vertical axis. Okay. So this is the pivot type of joint, superior radio-ulnar joint. Now, coming to the next variety that you have already studied, that is the joint between the axis and the atlas. So, this is the median atlantooaxial joint. There are three articulations between the axis and the atlas. There is one median atlantoaxial joint and there are two lateral atlantoaxial joints. You already have studied this when you learned about the cervical vertebra. So, this is the median atlantoaxial joint. Bends of the axis is going to articulate with the anterior arch of atlas. Okay, this is the transverse ligament of atlas, and so here ring is formed, and this is the rod. So this is the vertical axis. Okay, so here what is fixed and what is rotating? Here the rod is fixed. Okay, the axis is fixed, and only the atlas is going to rotate. So this is the median atlantoaxial joint, and this is an example for a pivot joint. Previously we saw the superior radial joint. The osseofibrous ring is fixed, whereas the head of radius is rotating. Here the dens of axis is fixed and the ring is rotating. The atlas is rotating. So in this you can see the dens is fixed, the axis is fixed, whereas the atlas is the one that is rotating. The ring is rotating and the pivot is fixed. Along with that, the entire skull is rotating. So along the median atlantoaxial joint, we get the no movement. Like how you say no with your head. Now coming to the next variety, that is ellipsoid joint. Here this is a biaxial joint. So there are two axes. One is the transverse axis and the other one is the anteroposterior axis. Okay. So here one articular surface is oval and convex and the other articular surface is concave. And the convexity of one articular surface fits into the concavity of the other articular surface. So there is a transverse axis and there is an anteroposterior axis. Here the transverse diameter is more than that of the anteroposterior diameter. And what are the examples for ellipsoid joint? There are two examples. One is the wrist joint and one is the atlanto-occipital joint. So now you can see this is the wrist joint. So the proximal articular surface is concave and the distal articular surface that is formed by the carpal bones is convex. Okay, and the convexity is fitting into the concavity of the wrist joint. And there are two axes. One is the transverse axis and one is the anteroposterior axis. So along the transverse axis, you get the flexion and extension of the wrist. And along the anteroposterior axis, you get the adduction and abduction of the wrist. So this movement is adduction, this movement is abduction, and this movement is flexion of the wrist. Another example for ellipsoid joint is the atlanto-occipital joint. So between this is the occipital bone and this is the atlas. So between the occipital bone and the atlas, there is atlanto-occipital joint. Articular surface of the occipital bone is reniform or kidney shape. In the lateral mass of atlas, there is a concave facet for the atlanta-occipital joint. You have already studied this when you learned about the atlas. And here you get the atlanta-occipital joint, and this is an ellipsoid type of joint. Flexion extension and lateral flexion is possible at the atlanta-occipital joint. Now we look at the next variety of the synovial joint, that is saddle joint. So from the name itself, the articular surfaces are saddle shaped, and it is a biaxial joint. So there is 2 axes and 4 moments that are possible. So here the articular surface of one bone is concave or convex, and that will fit into the convexo-concave reciprocal surface. Okay, the convexo-concave surface of the other bone. And the examples for these, you should know the names. That is the first carpometacarpal joint and the calcaneocuboid joint. So let us look at this diagram. This is the first carpometacarpal joint, or the carpometacarpal joint of the thumb. The remaining carpometacarpal joints are not saddle type of synovial joint, whereas only the first carpometacarpal joint is saddle variety. So this is the various movements that is possible when one of the articular surfaces is concave or convex and the other articular surface is reciprocally convex or concave. So it is called saddle shape because it is like a horse saddle. From side to side it is convex, and from anterior to posterior it is concave. So that is why it is called saddle type of synovial joint. Another example that you see in the lower limb is the calcaneocuboid joint. This is the heel bone, that is calcaneum, and in front of this, one of the tarsal bones is the cuboid bone. So calcaneocuboid joint is also an example for saddle variety of synovial joint. Now coming to the next variety of synovial joint, that is ball and socket type of synovial joint. This is a multi-axial joint. There are about 3 axes. One is the transverse axis, one is the anteroposterior axis, and we have the vertical axis. Here it is called ball and socket because one articular end is like a ball and the other is like a socket, and the ball fits into the socket. Examples for this is the shoulder joint and the hip joint. So along the transverse axis we get the flexion and extension movement. Along the anteroposterior axis we get abduction and adduction movement, and along the vertical axis we get the rotatory movements, the lateral rotation and medial rotation. And a combination of all these movements is known as circumduction. So we can do circumduction with our shoulder joint as well as the hip joint. This is the shoulder joint. Here the ball is formed by the head of humerus and the socket is formed by the glenoid cavity of scapula. And these are the movements that is possible by the shoulder joint. This movement is known as circumduction. Now this is the hip joint. Here the ball is formed by the head of femur and the socket is formed by the acetabulum. So the head of femur fits into the acetabulum and it is a multi-axial joint. The next variety is condylar type of joint. Here one of the articular surfaces is rounded or convex and the other articular surface is flat. Example for this is the metacarpophalangeal joint. Now let us look at the metacarpophalangeal joint. These are the metacarpal bones and these are the phalanges. So the joint between these are the metacarpophalangeal joint. Here you can see one of the articular surfaces is rounded and it is convex, and the other articular surface is flat. So we learned the wrist joint is seen between the bones of forearm and the carpal bones, and that is ellipsoid type of synovial joint, whereas the metacarpophalangeal joint is condylar type of synovial joint, and the interphalangeal joint is hinge type of synovial joint. Now coming to the next variety, that is bicondylar joint. Here the articular surfaces are 2 convex condyles. Examples are the knee joint and the temporomandibular joint. So we look at the knee joint. You can see there are 2 condyles of femur. At the lower end of femur there are 2 condyles that is going to articulate with the flat condyles of tibia. So since there are 2 condyles, it is bicondylar type of joint. Similarly, we have the temporomandibular joint. So we learned the temporomandibular joint in detail later. This is the condyle that is formed by the mandible. You must have learned about the condylar process of mandible. So that is going to articulate with the almost flat mandibular fossa of temporal bone. A similar joint is present in the other side also, and both act together as one unit. That is why the temporomandibular joint is known as bicondylar type of joint. Now we just saw how the synovial joints are classified according to the shape of the articular surfaces. Now we look at the classification of the synovial joints based on the number of bones that are articulating within a joint. There is 2 types of joints, that is simple joint and compound joint. Simple joint, only 2 bones are taking part in the articulation. An example for this is the interphalangeal joints of the fingers and toes. IP means interphalangeal joints of the fingers and toes. In compound joint, more than two bones are taking part in the articulation. So example for this is the ankle joint and the wrist joint. So wrist joint, we know it is seen between the bone of forearm, that is radius, and the carpal bones. So there are many bones that are taking part in the formation of wrist joint. Similarly, ankle joint is seen between the bones of the leg, that is tibia and fibula, and the tarsal bones within the feet. So in the ankle joint also there are more than two bones that are taking part in the articulation. One more type of joint is the complex type of joint, where a joint is divided into two compartments by an articular disc or a meniscus. So example for that we have already seen. One is the knee joint where we get the meniscus, and the other is the temporomandibular joint where we get the articular disc. So this is how you classify the synovial joints based on the number of bones that are articulating. Now another classification is based on the axis of the movement and the movements that are possible. So here we have the uniaxial joint, the biaxial joint, and the polyaxial or the multiaxial type of joint. So we have already seen all this. There is uniaxial joints. We learned the different types are the hinge joint, the pivot joint, and the condylar joint. Okay. So example for hinge joint, we have the elbow joint or the interphalangeal joint. So these are all uniaxial joint where only we have the transverse axis. Pivot joint is also a uniaxial joint where the axis is vertical axis. Examples are the superior radioulnar joint and the median atlantoaxial joint. Then we have the condylar type of joint. Examples are the metacarpophalangeal joint. Then coming to the biaxial joint, here there are two axes. So in case of ellipsoid joint, there is a transverse axis and there is an anteroposterior axis. Example for ellipsoid is the wrist joint. And saddle joint, that is also a biaxial type of joint. Examples are the carpometacarpal joint of the thumb and the calcaneocuboid joint of the foot. Then we have got the polyaxial or the multiaxial joint. So here there are three axes. So example is the ball and socket type of joint where there is a transverse axis, there is an anteroposterior axis, and there is a vertical axis. Examples are the shoulder joint and the hip joint. And there is plane type of synovial joint. Examples are the intercarpal joint and the intermetatarsal joints. Now let us look at some factors which help in the maintaining the stability of the joint. The first factor, that is the bony configuration, that is the shape of the articular surfaces that is taking part in the joint. Then comes the ligaments. The fibrous capsule is strengthened by various ligaments and that can withstand stresses. And then also the muscles that is acting on the joint helps in maintaining the stability of the joint. Then we need to know two terms, that is what is close packed position of the joint and what is the loose packed position of the joint. So close packed position of the joint is also known as screw home position. In this close packed position, the two bones are perfectly congruent. They are perfectly fitting into each other, and there is no joint space for flushing of the synovial fluid. So when the two bones are perfectly fitting into each other, perfectly congruent, there is no joint space for the flushing of the synovial fluid. And the capsule is maximally stretched. The fibrous capsule is maximally stretched. So this is known as the screw home position or the close packed position. Now the opposite of that is the loose packed position. Here the two bones are not perfectly congruent and there is a joint space for the flushing of the synovial fluid, for the lubrication by the synovial fluid and for nutrition of the articular cartilage. And here the capsule is not stretched, the capsule becomes loose. So these are the factors which help in maintaining the stability of the joint. Now let us look at the blood supply of the joint. So the arteries that enter the joint, they are going to break up into a rich capillary plexus in the synovial membrane, and that is going to provide nutrition to the structures within the joint capsule. And coming to the nerve supply, the capsule and the ligaments also possess rich nerve supply, and these nerves can be both sensory and autonomic fibers. Have you heard of this term that is called Hilton's law? This is very important. Hilton's law states that the nerves that are supplying the joint also supply the muscles that is regulating the movements of the joint and the skin over the joint. So look at this diagram. This is the diagram of the elbow joint. This is the fibrous capsule of the elbow joint. And these are the nerves that are supplying the fibrous capsule. These same nerves are going to supply the muscles and also the skin over the joint. Let us look at some clinical correlations. So in one of the conditions, where the articular cartilage undergoes wear and tear as the age advances. So in old age, the articular cartilage has undergone wear and tear. That is caused by the prolonged friction between the bone ends, leading to degeneration of the articular cartilage. So this is how the articular cartilage will appear. This is the normal cartilage, and after some time the articular cartilage has undergone degeneration. This condition is known as osteoarthritis. What is arthritis? Arthritis is simply inflammation of the joints. The patient will experience pain and swelling, and there will be limitation of movements. That is known as arthritis. Then, what is rheumatoid arthritis? You must have heard of the term rheumatoid arthritis. It is actually an autoimmune condition and it usually affects the small joints, especially the joints of the fingers, that is the interphalangeal joints. What is arthralgia? Arthralgia is pain in the joint without signs of inflammation. If there is inflammation, it is known as arthritis, and if there is pain without inflammation, it is known as arthralgia. Then what is gout? You must have heard of this term, gout. It is an inherited disorder. You learn more details in biochemistry. So here what happens is there is accumulation of uric acid in the blood. So uric acid crystals are going to deposit in the joint cavity. That results in arthritis of the metacarpophalangeal joint of the big toe. So the most common site is the metacarpophalangeal joint of the big toe. This is the condition where you get the swelling over the metacarpophalangeal joint of the big toe. That is because the uric acid crystals are depositing within the joint cavity. What is sprain? Sprain is when there is a tear in the ligament. The patient experiences pain and swelling in the joint. You must have heard of angle sprain, where one of the important ligaments of the angle joint gets torn. Then what is dislocation of the joint? When one of the articular surface slips away from the other articular surface. This is common in the shoulder joint and the temporomandibular joint. The reasons can be various reasons. One is when there is lack of support by the ligaments or by the muscles, or because of the poor shape of the articular surfaces. Then, have you heard of the term that is called arthroplasty? This is very common surgery that is performed now. Arthroplasty is replacement surgeries. We have the knee replacement surgery and the hip replacement surgeries. Look at this X-ray. The first X-ray shows the shoulder joint, but there is an inferior dislocation of the head of humerus. Usually the head of humerus has to be here. The head of humerus should articulate with the glenoid cavity of the scapula, but you can see here the head has slipped downwards. So this is inferior dislocation of the shoulder joint. Now look at the second image, that is the condylar process of mandible is usually articulating with the mandibular fossa of the temporal bone. But here you can see it has slipped anteriorly. There is anterior dislocation of the temporomandibular joint. And this is a very painful condition, and the patient presents with an open mouth, and the patient is not able to close the mouth. Usually occurs when the students yawn in the class and the class becomes boring. And as a result, the patient is not able to close the mouth. Then look at this X-ray. This is an X-ray showing the knee joint. The lower part of femur and the upper part of tibia, they are affected by arthritis. So the defective bone is removed and they are replaced by metallic components or by plastic components. And this is known as arthroplasty. So there is knee arthroplasty and there is hip arthroplasty as well. Let us look at some investigations for our joint diseases. One thing is the plain X-ray can be taken for investigation. Then CT can be taken, MRI can be taken. To some extent, ultrasonography also helps in identifying various joint diseases. And one of the upcoming investigation that is done is arthroscopy. That is for visualization of the joint cavity. So just like how we have an endoscope to visualize the GIT, just like that, to visualize the joint cavity, an arthroscopy can be done, through which various probes are introduced. One is a camera, other instruments can be introduced into the joint cavity. So this is knee arthroscopy. You can see this is the image that is seen on the TV. This is the condyle of the femur. This is the tibial condyle, and this is the meniscus, the fibrocartilage meniscus that is seen. So it can be used for diagnostic as well as therapeutic purposes. See if there is any meniscal tear or any other injuries within the joint cavity. So that is all about joints and the classification of joints. The various questions that is asked are to write short notes on fibrous joints or cartilaginous joints or synovial joints, and the various classification of the synovial joints with examples. All these are very important. So you should remember the examples for the different types of joints. Thank you.